Hello and welcome to Season 6, Episode 4 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Jessica Wilmot, coming to you live from Johannesburg. Be sure to follow BirdLife South Africa on all major social media platforms and please feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear your thoughts on our show. Our Facebook page is also up and running again, so please be sure to follow our new page to receive updates, which includes project updates as well as any events that we have ongoing. As always, our webinar is loaded up onto our YouTube channel a day or two after. So if you happen to have missed one of our exciting webinars, please have a look on our YouTube channel to catch up. We aim to keep these webinars free for all to enjoy and learn. So if you are inclined to or feel compelled to donate to help us with the running costs, please do so. There are various methods for you to donate towards the cause. Then the reason why we're all here, I'm really excited for this webinar tonight, as I'm sure you are all as well. So the Black Harrier, Southern Africa's rarest endemic raptor, is in serious trouble. With fewer than 1,300 individuals remaining, it's on a trajectory that could see it vanish within the next 75 years. This iconic species is being pushed to the brink of habitat loss and fragmentation, collisions with wind turbines, and the growing threat of climate change, which is predicted to shrink its already limited refugia even further. To make matters worse, its preferred prey is also expected to decline, compounding the challenges it already faces. In response to these challenges, which seem a crazy amount, a dedicated group of researchers has spent the last 25 years tracking more than 60 Black Harriers across South Africa. Their work has revealed astonishing insights into the species ecology, from vast home ranges and long-distance migrations to the perilous journeys through wind farm-dense landscapes. In this talk, we'll uncover some of the untold stories about this endangered raptor and hear how the newly formed Black Harrier Task Force is developing targeted conservation strategies to try and save it from extinction. Joining us today are two passionate experts who have played a central role in this work. First, we have Odette Curtis-Scott, is the CEO and founder of the Overberg Renosterveld Conservation Trust, established back in 2012. Under her leadership, the trust has secured over 6,000 hectares of Renosterveld for conservation through land acquisition and partnerships with private landowners. Odette chairs the Black Harrier Task Force, a collaborative initiative uniting NGOs and specialists to safeguard this threatened raptor. In her free time, she channels her love for Renosterveld into photography and art, celebrating the biodiversity of this critically endangered ecosystem. Then we have Dr. Rob Simmons, who's soon becoming a constant on our webinar. He is an avian specialist with nearly 40 years of research experience spanning continents, from Canada to Papua New Guinea. Once described as an academic gypsy, Rob has published on a wide range of topics, from climate change and domestic cat predation to giraffe evolution and reducing bird strikes at wind farms. He studied astrophysics in London, Harrier ecology in Nova Scotia, and eventually made his way to Namibia, where he served as state ornithologist. Now, Rob runs Birds and Bats Unlimited, an environmental consultancy with his partner Marley. For the past 25 years, he's been at the forefront of Black Harrier research alongside Odette and other students. And in his downtime, if he has any left, he jogs, cycles, and plays endless fetch with his dog Max. Both Rob and Odette are honorary research affiliates at the University of Cape Town, serve on the Black Harrier Task Force, and act as BirdLife South Africa's species guardian for the Black Harrier. Or guests to please put on their video so we can introduce them, and then I'll stop sharing. Hi, Rob. Hi, Odette.
Hi, Jess. Hi. Good to see you again.
So the floor is yours, Odette, if you would like to share your screen.
Yes. Thank you, Jess. Rob and I are absolutely blown away by the response to this talk. I'm just watching the numbers climb. So thank you to all of you who are attending and making time to listen to what we have to say. We are going to do a shared talk, so there'll be a little bit of an interruption in between when we swap over. So I'm going to do the first part and the end of the talk, and Rob's going to do a big chunk in the middle of it. Thank you for all the hearts. Okay, so we're going to talk about 25 years of Harrier research and conservation, and where we came from and where we are now. So when we started this project in 2000, I was a student at the FITS working with Andrew Jenkins, and we reached out to Rob and we said to him, "You're the Harrier guru." He'd worked on marsh harriers, and would you like to collaborate on Black Harriers? We know absolutely nothing about them, or we know very little about them. And he said yes, and from there this amazing partnership and friendship developed over many, many years. So what we knew in 2000 was that Black Harriers breed in montane habitats and coastal habitats, mostly within the fynbos areas. They've suffered potentially a lot of habitat loss because of how much Renosterveld we've lost. We knew that the population was relatively small inherently, and the species is a near endemic, or it's essentially endemic to South Africa, with a few birds popping into Namibia. We suspected they may undertake some movement into the eastern parts of the country. They were presumed to be rodent specialists, and they were listed at the time as vulnerable on the South African Red List. And essentially everything we knew about their breeding biology was from one publication by Francois van der Merwe in 1981. So a bird in trouble already then, but with very little attention up until that point. What we didn't know was how this significant loss in the lowlands had affected them. So we talk about the lowlands for us being the inland lowlands. So this is the Overberg, to give you an example. These areas are the coastal vegetation along the coast and montane habitats here. Then there's this extensive area that was Renosterveld historically, and the same sort of picture applies to the Swartland. And today, all that's left are these tiny little bits and pieces scattered in a matrix of wheat fields, essentially, croplands. And so the question was, did Harriers breed here? Do they breed here in what's left? Because if they do, they've lost a significant chunk of their habitat. So we didn't even know if they bred in croplands like their cousins in the Northern Hemisphere. So we didn't know how much time they spend in natural versus transformed lands for foraging, whether or not they're polygynous, where they go after breeding. The most popular sort of theory at the time was that they go up to Namibia. And we didn't know anything about their population viability and what the main threats were to the species. So for the last 25 years, our aims have kind of matured and developed, but in the beginning, it was to first understand the role of habitat fragmentation and in their reproductive output, and whether or not they depended on these Renosterveld habitats historically, and then look at whether certain habitats promote higher breeding success. Also to understand, we knew something about where they're nesting, but where do they forage in relation to this? How far do they forage, and does this differ between different habitats? Also, what's, as we mentioned, the greatest threats to the species, and how we can mitigate these, if at all possible. And then more recently, Rob especially has been working on with other colleagues on models to understand various aspects of Black Harrier biology. So modeling habitat suitability and being able to predict where Harriers are likely to be breeding, which can inform developments, particularly wind farms. The impacts of climate change, or the predicted impacts of climate change in the near future. And also collision risk modeling around wind farms. And then, of course, their population viability. How safe are they? And yeah, what threats do they face going into the future? So this is an updated database from what we started developing in 2000, when we knew mostly a lot about what was going. Well, we knew quite a bit about coastal breeding here on the west coast and into the Overberg along the coastal reserves. We knew that harriers liked those areas, and we knew that they were using some of these montane sites in the area, sort of not too far from Cape Town. Then the big question marks, as I mentioned, were in these lowland areas, these inland lowland areas of the Swartland and the Overberg. What was going on there? And we actually did find that they bred in these Renosterveld remnants. And we found that if we take the entire database, today's database, which is comprises over 300 nests or nest sites. So a site is where birds have bred once or multiple times over years. There are over 300 that we've recorded to date. 46% of these are coastal, so in strandveld and coastal habitats. 26% in the lowlands, so inland lowlands, Renosterveld essentially, and then 28% montane. And breeding success increases towards the coast. So the highest breeding success in the coast and also in the inland lowlands, lowest breeding success in the mountains, where we believe they're being forced to kind of forage further away from their nests. And then if we look at the nests in relation to protected areas or formerly protected areas, and this excludes OECMs, which I'll talk about later, but the new stat is that 53% are in formerly protected areas. So nearly 50% are not protected or not falling into protected areas. And that is of great concern. What we've learned to date is that fynbos and Renosterveld is the preferred habitat, and that most nests, as you saw from the map, are in the Western and Northern Cape. However, there's a big gap in the Eastern Cape. We hear so many anecdotal reports of birds in the Eastern Cape. Definitely sound like lots more breeding pairs there than we are aware of, and this is a big gap in the knowledge that we need to close. We need to understand where these critical areas are in the Eastern Cape and the grasslands, and we're very sure there'll be a lot more added to this database if we could do some work in that area. For Renosterveld, it appears that the minimum patch size that they require is 100 hectares or at least 100 hectares, or potentially smaller remnants close to each other that add up to 100 hectares, but they are not going to use small, scrappy little pieces of Renosterveld. They use kind of the biggest, the most intact, and they definitely do not breed in wheat fields and croplands, like, for example, Montague's Harriers and so on. And then, as we've said, coastal and inland areas or lowland areas are far more productive in terms of reproductive success. There are more mice in these areas, and the seasons are also much longer at the coast and in the Renosterveld. And then breeding success has been tied to higher rainfall and lower temperatures. So they're very tuned into the climate around them, and they respond very quickly, very obviously to rainfall, which results in higher rodent populations, especially. And I think with that, I'm going to hand over to Rob for his section of the talk.
Okay, as Odette said, we've worked on these birds for a long time. Sorry, I'm getting some strange things happening on my end. And one of the things that we used to do is to collect feathers from the females, because they would drop their feathers as they started to nest, as this bird is here down on the ground in the fynbos, Renosterveld, and sometimes in Karoo scrub. I would collect those feathers over the years, and collected some from the Northern Cape, Western Cape, and even a few from the Eastern Cape with the help of colleagues there. And What we did was to give them to a geneticist, Jérôme Fuchs in this case, a French researcher who once walked into my office and said, "Have you got any material that we could do some assessments of?" And I said, "Jérôme, I've been waiting for you to walk into my office for the last 15 years." So I gave him all of my carefully tagged feathers from all over Southern Africa, or rather South Africa, from within the breeding range. And he came back with a very troubling result. When I say alarmingly low genetic variation there, I mean no genetic variation in the mitochondrial DNA. That's a small subsection of the whole nucleus and the whole genome, but it is a window into whether these birds have any genetic variation. We don't see any effects of that low genetic variation right now, like inbreeding, depression, or so on. They have good breeding success. So we've seen no abnormalities in the youngsters, no great egg failure, and so on. But the worrying thing there is that in future years, with climate change, then we might see the inability of the birds to not be able to adapt in an evolutionary sense to changing climates, be it higher temperatures, lower rainfall, all these things that they are highly adapted to. With climate change, temperatures are generally going to get higher and rainfall is generally going to get lower. You wouldn't believe that in Cape Town right now, but that's what the modelers tell us. So that is a worrying trend. Health-wise, Sophie Garcia Heras, who did a fantastic PhD on these birds starting in 2014 or so, and I'll introduce you to her just now. She did some blood sampling of live nestlings and the adults that she caught, and she found that 84% of them carry DDT and 78% of them carry PCB burdens. Now, we've all heard about DDT. The strange thing about DDT is it's not supposed to be applied in the Western Cape. We know it's applied in some of the northern provinces, Limpopo province, for example, where they have malaria issues, but our birds don't breed there. So we don't know how these youngsters are getting this DDT unless people are using it illegally, or our birds are actually, the females are actually getting it up in the northern provinces and then bringing it down and then giving it through eggs and so on to their youngsters. We just don't know that pathway. For the PCB burdens, I'm not going to go into that too much. There was a tussle with Eskom because the only way we could find that we could think where PCB burdens would come from was the transformer boxes, which are in the insulation oil. And Sophie did a very clever thing where she looked at the density of these transformer boxes around each of the nests, and she found there was a correlation. The higher the density of the transformer boxes, the more PCBs she found in the nestlings. It wasn't as if the mothers were already introducing it; the nestlings had it already. So we're still pondering how that one came about. And what's the issue with this? Well, the immune system is apparently compromised by these organochlorines. And that means these birds would not be able to respond so well if they did have something like an avian flu come through that we just heard from Jess as we started up here. So here's a trip down memory lane. When we were slim and had brown hair, we started tracking in 2002, and we used the old Yagi antenna, which was a bleep, bleep, bleep in your ear, and then we would triangulate where the two bleeps came from with another Yagi antenna. Here is the old trackers that we use. They were very large, and here's the antenna, rather cumbersome. When we used to actually sew them onto the central tail feather and then follow the bird around in the bad old days. And then technology caught up a little bit with Argos satellite tags, also had an antenna on it. And there's Sophie watching for birds. had a little solar panel on the back, and we could follow birds around the country. These were only 12.5 grams. Didn't give you very accurate locations, but accurate enough for us to find out where these birds were migrating to, which was part of Sophie's PhD. And then the good old GPS GSM tags, which can download to a cell phone tower, and were only 9 grams in weight. So here's Odette with her young daughter Molly, one of the birds. This bird was named after Molly. Here's Murgatroyd from Hawkwatch International, who came to join our team about 3 or 4 years ago. And here's some of the team here. Here's Grant. Here's Tony, a volunteer from the Netherlands, who I hope is tuning in. And here's the old codgers in the background. And that's how we started to track. That's a brief history of how we tried to track these birds. And here's an introduction to Sophie. She's here stealing an egg from a sitting female, a wild Black Harrier incubating female. I put her on mute because she always had a lot to say. And not surprisingly, and there are the eggs. There are 4 eggs, ground nest in Jakkelsfontein Nature Reserve. I'll just show you that again. She remembers this very clearly. I corresponded with her yesterday, and she said she remembers this like it was yesterday. This bird came back successful at this nest. It doesn't happen very often, but it's a wonderful insight into these sometimes very tame birds. Let's see if we can get on to the next slide. So part of Sophie's work was to find out what the birds at the coast were doing, where they were foraging, where they were migrating to especially. She wrote a lovely paper in 2019 on the migration and the sampling that these birds do on migration. It's not a simple west to east migration. They breed in the winter rains, as we've got now. They'll be breeding now. When they finish their breeding in around November, December, then they think about heading eastwards into the summer rains. So that's what these birds are doing. Some of them even go as far as Joburg, way up here. Some of them don't move at all. Some of them stay down in the Overberg area, and we've seen that more and more in recent years when we've had good rainfall in this Overberg region down here. They tend to stay around. So actually, they're always looking for the best place from a high rainfall and high mouse point of view. Now, if we put all of the tracks together that Meg Murgatroyd, Odette, myself, and Sophie, there's about 50 to 60 birds tracked there. You will see the general movement from the west, where they're breeding in the winter and spring, to the summer movement, to the summer rains, as far as Lesotho. You can see Lesotho down there underneath all this mess. This point here is about less than 100 kilometers from Joburg itself. Can you believe that? These are I think it's the Belfast grasslands. So all of you guys in Joburg, don't think that these are a Western Cape bird. These birds come up to you in the summer months. They are there from about March, April, May, when they start to head down towards us. Some of these areas here is where a few birds will stay. We've had one or few, as Odette was saying earlier, in the Eastern Cape breeding, and some even on the edge of Lesotho in KZN here. So this represents about, I think it's about 60 birds altogether that we've now tracked. And this is a wonderful partnership between Hawkwatch International, and that's Meg Murgatroyd, Odette running the Overberg Renosterveld Trust, and Marley and myself running Birds and Bats Unlimited with other input from UCT. So one of the most interesting things that we've been able to look at, and many of you might have tuned in to for this very slide, is how do Black Harriers react around wind farms? Now, this is Ganymede. Eric Herman and I were looking in the Hopefield Nature Reserve, which is down here, for breeding birds and so on. We spent days and days down there looking for birds. We spent a couple of days in the Umoyo Energy Hopefield Wind Farm, and hey presto, we found 2 nests in 2024. Here's one of the nests. And here's the bird who owns that nest. We called him Ganymede. Marlene named him Ganymede. And this is an animation rendering by Campbell Fleming of just 5 days of how Ganymede moves around the wind farm. So you can see the scale there. It's 5 kilometers. Here he's nodding off to sleep. He generally heads in a south easterly direction, about 5 kilometers. Then he goes further down 8 kilometers. This is, as I say, about 5 days from the 10th to the 15th of November, just to give you some idea of how he moves around the wind farm. There's 37 turbines here. These are the little crosses here. And he's just falling asleep here. So that's the end of the 5th day on the 15th of November. If you look at the number of turbines that this bird has passed in this 5-day period, it actually is 10 different turbines. Now, you will have heard, and I'll give you a little bit at the end of our presentation, that we're doing some blade patterning experiments. This 5-day period basically the bird didn't pass any of those pattern blades. The pattern blades were actually just 4 turbines over here. He didn't pass it in this time. He did later on, and we're going to get some clever statisticians, Robin Collane, to assess whether he took greater avoidance activity around the patterned blades than he did the control blades. All these ones that he was passing here are control white blades, and he seemed to be successful. Sorry, he was successful. He raised 2 youngsters, as did Houdini, whose nest is here. I haven't got an animation for him. This takes a long time to do the animations. Houdini also was passing up to 14 turbines in a day, and he too was successful. There was one bird, as these guys were settling, who was killed by a turbine approximately there. So sometimes they don't make it. So let's have a look at the next bird. This bird was named Peter, after the great raptor biologist Peter Steyn, who himself passed away recently. He was a wonderful person who helped us a great deal with some of our initial studies of Black Harriers, and it was a mine of information. A really wonderful guy. So Peter the Black Harrier, his nest was here, down in an area called Chorizo, and this is the Excelsior wind farm here. Odette will tell you a little bit later about Chorizo, some very wonderful news from there. Now, again, we've just taken a snapshot, the 11th of January to the 15th of January, of how this bird, Peter, was going around the wind farm. So there were no wind farms north. We were interested in those areas there. That circle is 4 kilometers. So you can see he goes about 8 or 10 kilometers. And then suddenly, oops, on the 14th of January, his tracker stopped right there. But I was still getting a signal up until the 18th of January. And only then did I check 4 days after this tag had stopped at turbine number 1. I rang Odette and I said, Odette, I've got some bad news for you. Our tracker, Peter, has stopped, and it's underneath turbine 1. Could you go and have a look? She rang the officials at the Excelsior wind farm. They went to have a look. They said there was nothing there. I said, there definitely is something there because my tracker is still giving us a ping from the 14th to the 18th when they went out there. Odette then went out there, and she found this tag. It was smashed. It was directly below the turbine. And from first of all, looking back at the track, we could tell that the track had actually stopped sometime between 10:38 and 10:43 because we had it on 5-minute pings, if you like, and it was definitely under turbine number 1. And here you see the hard plastic has been smashed, and there's down on the back. The trouble is there was no bird there. Now, the Excelsior officials, who we work very well with, I have to say, they said, well, if there's no bird, how do you know it's there? Well, you don't get a tracker which just comes off a bird and is smashed. It was like the smoking gun. And this actually tells us a very interesting thing, that for birds which are killed by wind turbines, they are often removed, they are often scavenged, and people who do assessments of wind farms have to take that scavenging rate into account. And this one proves that birds are scavenged as quickly as within 4 days. So that was a great eye opener for us and a very sad tale indeed. So outside the wind farms, we know from Sophie's work that maximum distance between the breeding and non-breeding sites could be as much as 1,200 kilometers. In one incredible flight, one female, she moved from Piketberg in the Western Cape to Kokstad in the Free State, and that's 1,140 kilometers. She did that in 3 days flat. In the central section of that, she actually flew continuously for 12 hours and covered 525 kilometers across the Karoo. Whenever I see these sort of figures, I always chuckle when I look back at what the great raptor biologist Leslie Brown once said, who wrote lots of raptor books, Raptors of the World books, and he once described the Harriers as weak flyers. I just wish he was alive today to see some of these crazy flights that these birds are doing. On migration, these birds can average speed of between 40 and 60. That particular bird, I don't have her name, she actually had a maximum speed of 80 kilometers per hour. Obviously, a wind behind her pushing her that way. Again, from Sophie's work, we know that the foraging range is average 16 kilometers from the nest, with a range of about 7 kilometers. In the Overberg, it's about that, to up to 33 kilometers. And now, to really blow your mind, I'm going to show you one of the largest breeding home range that we've ever found. And this bird was named Gulliver by myself for Gulliver's Travels. You all know about Gulliver's Travels. Well, Gulliver bred in the Kamdaboo Mountains. This little place here is Aberdeen. This is the R61, a pretty dangerous road here. And here's his nest at the top of one of the mountains there. So I'm going to show you this animation, see if it works. This is his foraging range over 6 weeks. That central circle there is 5 kilometers. Then the next one is 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, 20, 25. So here he is going at least 15 kilometers out in a southwesterly direction. And then suddenly, at the end of January, he starts to head 25 to 30 kilometers to the north. And then he soars back down here and continues this foraging through here. This I wish I could show you more of his foraging range, but Campbell, who very kindly did all of this for us, it took him 3 days to do this animation because there was so many data points here, even with it thinned out. So just to give you some idea, if you take the perimeter around there, it's called the minimum convex polygon. His total home range there was 530 square kilometers. That is bigger than the average Marshall eagle. And how do we know that? Well, I spoke to my good friend and colleague, Dr. Gareth Tate, who studies also with GPS tags Marshall eagles in the Karoo. He says the average for a breeding marshal, this is a breeding Black Harrier breeding marshal in the Karoo, is 360 square kilometers, and the maximum is 650. So this small bird, this small Black Harrier, this weak flyer, has actually a larger home range than the average for a huge marshal eagle. And from an ecological point of view, it's generally a rule of thumb that the smaller the species, the smaller the home range. Here we've got a small 400 to 600 gram bird having these colossal home ranges in the Karoo. So one of the other things that our tracked birds allows us to do, and we've got about 65 tracked birds throughout from Sophie, Meg, Odette, and myself, we know by following up where the tracker stopped, what actually happened to that bird. And we've just taken 12 of the 65 where we actually found the bird and we could tell exactly what had happened to the bird. There are many, this is only about a fifth of that sample, 12 out of 65. The other 4/5, we don't really know what happened to the bird. The signal simply stops, the bird disappears. We just don't know. But these are the ones we do know. So the ones that head this group, the known mortalities, 25% for wind turbines, 25%, this is a surprise, were power line collisions. I never expected power lines to be quite so high on the agenda, and then natural causes, and by that I mean aerial predators. For one of Meg's birds, she found the tag underneath a black sparrowhawk nest. For goodness sake, bloody black sparrowhawks eating our black harriers! How dare they? We found a bird had stopped in the Richtersveld, and we asked a colleague through Eric Herman, who we go through directly, if he could go into the Richtersveld. He was one of the Springbok Nature Conservation officials. Thank you very much. And he found just the plucked carcass, just feathers and a very, very plucked carcass, and almost certainly a Lanner falcon or something like that. There are no power lines there, there's no roads there. It could only have been an aerial predator. And probably the most bizarre one that we found, one of our birds who had been roosting in a wheat field, in a cereal field. Suddenly we realized that his tracker had stopped moving. And then I think it was Grant, one of Odette's colleagues, went to investigate and found this poor bird literally cut in half. This bird was cut in half by the wheat cutter harvester. How would that happen? Well, in the Overberg, the farmers actually cut their wheat at night. They want to get the whole harvest in, so sometimes they go into the night as well. They use very bright lights on their harvesters, and we think it blinded the bird. It didn't take off, and it just got chopped up by the harvester, and the tracker was still going. There's one case of suspected poison, and one that we just didn't know why the bird had died. So that gives us some insights. Very difficult to know generally the mortality factors. So with tracked birds, it does help. So we know that quite a few birds are killed by wind turbines, and the next question becomes, well, okay, so what does that actually mean? A very clever friend of mine and colleague, Pachi Cervantes, he is a statistical modeler. He used SABAC detection and non-detection data over their entire range between 2008 and 2019. And from that, he was able to estimate the entire global population. Now, there's only 1,300 individuals in 2022 when he published this paper. I want to put that in perspective a little. We've got about 35,000 penguins that you all know all about. We've got about 2,000 pairs of blue swallows. We've only got 1,306 Black Harriers in the world, and that was in 2022. That's 3 years ago. So that figure is going to be lower than that now. So it's a tiny, tiny population. Only two birds we know, only two species we know, Rudd's lark and Botha's lark, which have lower populations than that. One of the things with these longer-lived birds is that by killing adults, we know we have a greater impact on the population numbers and the overall viability than if we were to reduce the breeding success or kill youngsters. And from Pachi's work, we also know that the annual decline is about 2.3% per year. That alone, without any extra fatalities, would lead to the extinction in about 200 years. So what is the effect of extra deaths on black harriers? Pachi did some very interesting modeling. These are the only graphs I'm going to show you tonight. They're very, very simple. The vertical axis here is the total population size. There's the 1,300 birds that Pachi assessed, and then he was looking at the trajectory, the decline over 50 years, 75 years, 100 years, what it's predicted to do. And at the present rate, if you take this out here, it would be about 200 years and the bird would go extinct. If we added just one adult extra bird to that fatality estimate, then that decreases to closer to about 100 years. And then if we increase that to 3 adults per year, my cursor has disappeared, we can see that the line flatlines. There it is, the flat lines between 75 and 100 years with just 3 extra birds killed, possibly by wind turbines, by hitting cars more often, by colliding with power lines, or by being poisoned. And if we take that to 5 adult birds per year, then the population will flatline within 75 years. And that's got statisticians love probabilities. That has a probability of happening with a 70% probability in 75 years, just 5 extra adults per year. So we know from some very nice work done by Sam Ralston of BirdLife South Africa. She's done a survey of all the specialist reports that BBU and other specialists are writing. And she found that at least since 2014, at least 13 black harriers have been killed by wind farms. Now we can actually double that. Remember, I spoke about Peter, who himself wasn't found, but his tag was found smashed below the turbine. The carcass removal, if you do those carcass removal experiments and observer bias, we know that about twice that number is actually killed by wind farms. The figure is not twofold; it's 1.9-fold. Now, if we do the sums on that, it actually equates just wind farms alone to 3.6 fatalities per year. And that means, according to Patch's data, the extinction is predicted in less than 100 years just from wind farms. And all of those birds on the left are wind farm victims, mainly from Jeffreys Bay, where Marley and I worked. But Jeffreys Bay is not the only wind farm which is killing black harriers. So what are the major threats to black harriers? It's not just wind farms. It is habitat loss. Odette will tell you a little bit about, and has already told you a little bit about that. The elephant in the room is climate change. That is going to change everything from to hotter temperatures to lower rainfall. That means the habitat which is available left and the prey which are left for the black harrier is going to reduce and reduce and reduce. And Dr. Robin Collane and we have collaborated on a paper in press on what that will actually mean. And basically, in a nutshell, by 2080, the present range is going to decrease to about 20% of its present size by 2080, and that's not very far away. And then, as we've heard, collisions are one of the major threats to black harriers. That's either collisions with wind turbines, spinning blades, by collisions with overhead power lines, or even collisions with cars on the R27 next to the West Coast National Park. One of Sophie's birds that she had ringed as a nestling was found as an adult killed on the R27. So Odette and I agreed that we didn't want this to just to be a doom and gloom talk. We wanted to say, how are these threats being addressed? And one of the ways that we have tried with Sam Ralston's backing and pushing and big stick is to write Black Harrier and wind energy guidelines. And these are guidelines to help specialists and others to actually find the nests which are in these proposed wind farms before hopefully the wind farm is built. Increase the efficiency of the survey techniques, and if you find those nests, how to mitigate them in a very coarse way. The nest buffers, to give it between a 3 and a 5 kilometer nest buffer, because as you saw, these birds travel a very long way. And avoid these high risk areas. And some of the work that Robin Collane has done is to do a habitat suitability model, which also appears within these guidelines. And quite proud of that, and it is used by a lot of people. And it is the Bible for black harriers. It's not the only guidelines from BirdLife South Africa. They've also written guidelines for Vero's eagles, and they've also done so for Cape vultures, and there's one for Marshall eagles in the pipeline. So a more practical way, or a direct way of decreasing the threats is, as I mentioned earlier, is to experiment with patterned blades. Now here you see one of the turbines at the Hopefield wind farm, the Amoyo Energy wind farm in Hopefield. I must get that right. We've been experimenting with that for the last 2 years, and we know that we know what the fatality rate for that particular turbine there that you see might be turbine number 34. We know what the fatality rate of birds was before we did the experiment, and now we know what the fatality rate is for 2 years after the experiment. And we got some quite exciting results from that, which are significant. So the pattern blades have reduced all bird fatalities by 85%. And the most impacted group, including jackal buzzards, we've got 14 species of raptors flying around the Hopefield wind farm, and 10 of those species have been killed by the pre-patterned blades, if you like, and we've been able to reduce that by 86%, including no more black harriers, no more jackal buzzards. We've had one fatality, and that was a yellow-billed kite. So we're very excited about those results. I think this is where Odette is going to take over and see you through to the conclusion.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, you'll have to, yeah, there we go. And share again. Okay. Right. Okay, so with this information at hand, we are hoping that, well, we're seeing that more and more wind energy facilities, WEFs as we call them, are committing to improved tiers of mitigation. And in many cases, tiers involve several approaches altogether to see which ones are the most effective. So with new applications, it's possible to really push developers and push the environmental consultants as well to make sure that these tiers of mitigation are included in what they call the EMPR, the environmental management programs, before the development is approved. So the different tiers of mitigation can involve, obviously, first of all, no-go, avoid area because it's a hotspot for harriers or vultures or whatever priority species come up in the avifaunal assessments. But then if it's going to go ahead, what measures can we put in place? And this is all very much still work in progress, but pattern blades are one of the things that is being pushed because of the apparent very positive impacts that it's making in this field. And then also shutdown on demand. And until now, that's mostly been observer-led shutdown on demand. So that means we have, or the wind farms have, people at designated vantage points, observation points, watching the entire day for raptors or threatened species that are coming towards the wind farm. And they have these various codes that they radio into the control room. And they say, for example, Black Harrier approaching turbine 13, code orange or whatever, and then it's coming closer and closer. Okay, shut down. And they shut down turbine 13 for that period of time until the bird is passed, and they say, okay, it's safe now, you can turn it on. And this has been pretty effective for larger birds, not as effective for Black Harrier because people make mistakes, people get tired, there's a glare, there's whatever, bad weather, and people make mistakes, and we've lost birds on sites where they are doing observer-led shutdown on demand, despite really, really good efforts. So it's not foolproof, but it's definitely stopped a lot of deaths. Then looking promising, but not there yet either, is AI-led SDOD, so shutdown on demand, but being led by trained cameras that are put on site and are trained to recognize the species that they need to shut down for. But again, this is still early days, and this needs a lot of refining. But the progress on this technology is very fast, and it's actually quite incredible. So there are various things that the new wind farms are putting in place. The biggest challenge is with the old ones, when this was not, we didn't have the knowledge we have now. We didn't know the impacts they were going to have, and there weren't the same restrictions or levels of mitigation in the EMPRs, and that's often where we're running into problems at this stage. Okay, then onto the habitat loss. I can only talk for what we're doing in the Overberg, and this obviously needs to be scaled up. But if we go, first of all, to the Overberg, so if we say this is Cape Agulhas, the southern tip of Africa down here, and this is where I live, here around Napier, and this is about, say, a 2-hour drive east of Cape Town for those who aren't in this part of the country. So the blue dots, or the blue squares actually, are coastal nests. So that's more strandveld coastal habitat. The purple ones are montane, so mostly mountain fynbos habitat. And then the yellow ones are lowland sites, mostly Renosterveld. As you can see, this is the highly transformed wheat belts. Only the dark little remnants here are what's left of the natural vegetation, as I showed you earlier. This, for example, is Overberg National Park. So that's what the distribution looks like in terms of what we have mapped. There are many gaps here, and obviously there will be more nests in certain areas, especially along the coast if they were surveyed. But if we then put this layer over the green protected areas, these are formally protected areas. So this, for example, is De Hoop Nature Reserve. As I mentioned here, Overberg National Park. So the green is protected areas. As you can see, there's a tendency with protected areas to be in coastal sites and in montane sites. This area here is a big scary sort of dark hole of full of challenges, because it's all privately owned and there are hundreds of farms across that landscape. That's where we focus our efforts, the Overberg Renosterveld Trust. We work here with landowners towards ultimately conserving what's left of the Renosterveld through partnerships with landowners. And so these blue sites are where we have signed what we call conservation easements, which are agreements with landowners that are registered on their title deeds. It's a conservation servitude in our favor, registered on a title deed, essentially. And then in a very special area, we are focusing on buying land. And it so happens that area where this is the most viable in terms of the most connected Renosterveld, where all the special plants and a whole lot of other amazing diversity is found, it also happens to be a hotspot for Black Harriers. And that is this area here, just north of De Hoop. And it's in this cluster where we have our reserve, Harvarskloof, and where we have recently purchase some more land. So Harvarskloof is this area in the front here, and that extends off the screen to the left as well. 500 hectares of Renosterveld. It's then opposite it is an amazing area called Plaatjieskraal, if you can see my cursor there into the distance. And then further north from there is Harriers. And hot off the press is the most exciting news that we are sharing this year. And we have much reason to celebrate that we just bought Harriers. This is the most special site because it is home to the highest known density of breeding Black Harriers. We have nearly 20 pairs of Black Harriers breeding here in 1 year, and this has happened over multiple years. So we're very excited. So between in this expansive area here, and we're busy working towards purchasing this piece in the middle here, which joins all these together. This could be as much as 6%, if not more, of the global breeding population of the species. So we're really thrilled about this, and it's really exciting. But of course, this is only in the Overberg, and we know the species breeds in many other parts of the country, up the west coast, where there's masses of mining threats and development threats, into the Northern Cape, where we've got so many issues with succulent poaching, etc. And then sort of big unknown situations in Lesotho and the Eastern Cape, where we know they are traveling to and breeding, feeding, roosting. So lots of question marks, lots of gaps that need filling, and lots of conservation issues that still need addressing. So as Rob mentioned, we have, together with our partners, established the Black Harrier Task Force. That it was actually more like revived recently than established. The partners include various specialists like Rob, and also other NGOs. So BirdLife is part of that, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, Hawkwatch International, and the Overberg Renosterveld Trust as well as conservation outcomes and Cape Nature, having joined recently as well. So that's quite exciting. So we are looking to grow this partnership and become as inclusive as we can, in a way that we also stay small and are effective and get things done. Some of the things that we do as the Black Harrier Task Force is that we interrogate and challenge development applications, particularly wind farm applications, wherever we have the capacity to do so. And this can take hours and hours or days of our time, working through these complex documents and reports and the EMPRs. But it's a crucial time, and it's an opportunity for us to influence how those EMPRs are put together. In other words, the plans that determine what the developers have to do on site during construction and after construction of wind farms. So as we've said, we also work really hard to keep developers and relevant authorities accountable, because they're the ones who actually need to be keeping the developers accountable. So that's a challenge on its own, and there are very few words there to describe something that is a really big challenge. We're also challenging the provincial authorities, Rob especially, to roll out blade patterning and to really implement this wherever possible. Or to encourage also in the commenting process, where they also have the opportunity to comment on these EMPRs, to put this blade patterning and all these other mitigations we've discussed in place. And something we're very excited about is that we are also developing a species conservation plan, where we identify the key actions in terms of our task force, who is responsible for what, and where are the gaps? Where are the gaps in terms of the physical gaps in the map? Where are the knowledge gaps? Where are the capacity gaps? What are the research priorities? What are the conservation priorities? And how can we implement those with what we have? And then, of course, how can we fundraise towards implementing that plan once it's finalized, which should be within the next couple of months. And we will make it publicly available. And then to use that as a platform from which to fundraise specifically for Black Harrier conservation. And then in the next year, or this season, Rob and I are very excited to have raised some funds to track some more adults, especially around wind farms. And this year also looking at tracking, at putting tags on juveniles and looking at juvenile dispersal, about something which we know absolutely nothing about. So that will be exciting if we can get that right. And then I just wanted to end on this happy note, because this, as Rob says, there's a lot of doom and gloom in this. So we feel, as the Black Harrier Task Force, we've got a lot to look forward to, and great partnerships happening. And then also just to mention, we are going to be bringing out a children's book very soon. Well, we hope within the next coming months. The Black Harriers are the central characters in this. It's a kind of a mixture between Julia Donaldson and Dr. Zeus and Black Harriers, telling a story of the wonderful diverse biodiversity in the areas that they nest in and travel through. So on that note, I would like to just also really thank every partner on the Black Harrier Task Force. Their logos are all listed here, as well as our recent partners, Cape Nature, and then also all our donors, especially the World Land Trust and Mapula Trust, who helped us secure Guriasu very recently. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Odette and Rob. I think I speak for everybody when we just applaud you for the incredible work you guys are doing. Hopefully you can see everybody's reaction. You know, it's over 20 years of groundbreaking research, collaboration, and your unwavering dedication has not only deepened our understanding of this incredible species, but it's also helped shape conservation interventions, which is so urgently needed to secure the future. So, you know, their survival is truly a tribute to your guys' efforts. And yeah, I think can't thank you enough. And everything you do is such an inspiration. So thank you, first and foremost.
Thank you, Jess.
So yeah, it's been a lot of really great questions. The one I always love to ask, and I'm so glad Ruan Govender has asked that. So before we get into the nitty-gritties, he's asked, as a general public and all those close to 500 viewers who've joined to, just listen to the work that you guys are doing, how can they get involved to help support these conservation efforts? So what's like the easiest way, I guess you can say like easiest way, the most expensive way that, the general public can get involved?
Can I start with that one? Okay, thanks, Rob. So I think once the Black Harrier action, whether the species action plan is out there, people can see where we've identified gaps that people can get involved. And, there's, especially in the Eastern Cape, we really need people to be looking out and for breeding pairs there. And I think we want to potentially put something together where we can give guidelines to people and what to look for that suggests a breeding pair is present, but not go in and disturb them necessarily at their nest and so on. So that's something we want to work towards. So in terms of feet on the ground and eyes, being on the lookout for these birds and really confirming. People often say, well, I see pairs all the time. Okay, but then we GPS points of those sites and that, and then we can start mapping those. So we also need to find a way to channel all that information, because that's going to be a challenge. But that's something that's on the cards for us that we've been talking about. And then, of course, there's the funding. A tag costs 25,000 Rand. So we've had amazing success and with all the tags that have been funded. I think for now Rob, we're okay on tags right now, hey?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think we sort of want to start a campaign when we figured out how to channel the information as it comes in on, have you seen this bird? And also helping people to be sure, okay, it's not a black sparrowhawk, it's a black harrier, and things like that, which do happen quite often. So yeah, we definitely looking for reportings and a way to channel that.
Right.
Rob,
Can I add
Rob,
just
do you want to add to that? Yeah.
Can I add two things to what Odette said, Jess? One is fill in your bird lasser sheets. Patchy wouldn't have been able to do his assessments, his brilliant statistical assessments without your data. So please keep that data coming in on bird lasser. The second thing is, if you are worried about a wind farm development in your area, please sign up as an interested and affected party. We've seen this in several areas. Odette has been heavily involved, as has Meg and Sam Ralston, in one particular wind farm. We won't go into it here. And their intervention actually changed the way the mitigations were being implemented and the type of mitigations. So you have that power to actually change the way things are doing by signing up as an interested and affected party.
Yes, thank you, Rob. Absolutely, that's critical. And then if you don't feel that you have the know-all to interrogate those, reach out to your bird clubs and to others or to us. I mean, we're already bombarded with the stuff, but we do need to find a way to get more people commenting on these and interrogating them.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Can't agree more, Odette and Rob, to that. It's really empowering the citizens who are as passionate as you guys are to also make a change. I think often people don't feel that they have the power to make change, but registering as an interested and affected party really can sway a lot of decisions, which is why I think the next webinar we're hosting with Protect the West Coast, they, and we saw somebody mentioned actually that they've seen some harriers along the West Coast. They've created a platform that empowers citizens to do exactly that. So please tune in for that. Then on wind farms, we've had a few questions from Mark Dixon, Marlies Mayer, and Ariane Schade. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but just about the blade patterning. So perhaps Rob, if you just want to give a brief overview of why it actually works and why the color red was chosen. I know we had a webinar before, so those who want more information, please go look on our YouTube channel. But Rob, if you just want to give a quick overview.
Very simply, way back, almost 25 years ago now, people realized that a long way away from here in the Altamont Pass in California, where there's something like 4,000 to 5,000 turbines in one valley. I've been there, it's an incredible sight. Thousands of birds and hundreds, actually, I think 1,300 red-tailed hawks, for example, and golden eagles were being killed per year. And they did the first assessments in the lab to say, why are so many birds, eagles especially, are being killed? They've got this amazing eyesight. Why can't they see these turbines? So they started to put stripes on them, and then they went into the lab and they used American kestrels as their lab animal, live birds, and they found that by putting stripes, they tested several different types, completely white, completely grey, stripes along, stripes across, zebra stripes, the whole lot. And they found two broad stripes across the blade was actually seen best behaviorally by American kestrels. And the reason we only use one blade of the three is because the next experiment, the first one was by Hugh McIsaac, the second one was by William Herdos, also in the lab with American kestrels, 2003. He said it might be because there's motion smear. These blades are going so fast that it's just a smear, like a propeller blade. Many people have walked into propeller blades which haven't been marked because they're not seen. It's just a blur. And William Herdos thought if you break up that blur, it's called motion smear, with just one black blade in amongst the three, then the birds should be able to see it. He did his experiments using the retinal responses, not the behavioral responses of American kestrels, and he found the single black blade was the best way to go. So we did one blade, we did two broad stripes, and then civil aviation came along and said, "Oh, you can't do that." And so Sam Ralston and I spent many years together with SAWIA, the Wind Energy Association of South Africa, and many interested and affected parties. We eventually convinced civil aviation that this was a good idea, and they said you can do it, but you can only use signal red, because we already use signal red on all our cell phone towers. So we said, okay, there's the loophole. We're going to dive through that loophole. Two broad stripes, they're going to be signal red. We're going to put them on 4 turbines at Umoyo in Hopefield, and we're going to test it for 2 years before, and then we do the treatment and test it for 2 years after, and hey presto. And we think the reason, Jess, is that the birds, this is the most amazing thing. Birds, even though they've got that amazing acuity, they see contrast 10 times less well than you and I. 10 times less. These are raptor, these are eagles, these are vultures. They see it 10 times less well than we do. So they will not see that white turbine, especially against a cloudy sky. They just won't see it. I was viewing a video of a vulture just going around and around in amongst this turbine blade that I could see easily, and everyone, the video operator could see easily, and eventually it got smacked by it, and took no evasive action. Marley and I have in the field seen a martial eagle do exactly that. It just flew straight into this turbine very slowly. We worked out that 2.6 seconds before the turbine that hit it, 2.6 seconds before, there was another turbine right in front of it. It was flying straight towards it, and it took no evasive action, got struck and was killed. So they do not see white blades against a pale background, incredibly. And that's why adding patterns to them will make them see them, and they do the avoidance.
Great, thanks for that, Rob. I think you alluded to that on our previous webinar, but it's an ongoing research topic, and we look forward to the research that will be coming out that you mentioned in your section of the webinar.
We're hoping to get, if there's any developers
Yeah.
listening in, we would love to have, you pattern all of your blades. And we know Mpumalanga province, bless them, are leading the pack here, in that they are now recommending for all new wind farms in Mpumalanga that they all go up with pattern blades. And while I've got their attention, don't just do one pattern blade, do three pattern blades, because we think we've made a mistake. We think we didn't make the mistake, but we now know that our wind turbine blades are not going fast enough to cause that blur. It's probably more to do with the lack of ability to see contrast than the blur, the sheer speed of the blade. So pattern all of them. And I challenged Cape Nature to do the same, following the Mpumalanga province's pioneering recommendations.
Great. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Rob. And again, information that people can include when they propose or comment against proposed wind farm developments. Maybe just to get last question, because we are going over time, but everybody is so just invested in this work that you guys are doing. From Odette, you had that map where you showed the critical habitats that they're dependent on, and very few, that you called it like the black patch. How easy is it to engage with farmers? Are they willing to partner with the trust to sign some kind of easement or OECM, knowing that it's vital for the species?
It's incredibly variable, and the responses depends greatly on my mood that day, because it can be extremely heartwarming and extremely heartbreaking. So yeah, we've had every extreme in response, been radically positive and radically negative to Renosterveld generally. And funnily enough, we really rely on pulling at heartstrings to get landowners on board with what we do. And it's funny, they seem to identify more with the rare plants in many cases, because they don't fly away, and because they own them, whereas a harrier can move in and out. It's a weird thing, but it's incredibly variable, but there are some amazing gems that we are working with. It's why we've managed to get so many hectares into conservation, but we still have many more areas that we would like to bring in. So yeah, it's a roller coaster, but we are very excited about the ones we're working with, and there's still a lot more areas to explore and relationships to build.
Great. Yeah, I can imagine just being so passionate and wanting everybody to believe in the cause and understand why. I can imagine it's a roller coaster, but you guys have done incredible work, and it's great that you have these champions that can almost also help pull at the heartstrings of those that are still on the fence, so that they can see the value of getting on board. And I think that's also the power of storytelling. So the conservation storytelling that you guys are doing in the children's book, I think that's also going to turn the tide, when the hearts of little kiddies, and hopefully they convince their dads to get on board. Okay, one last question, because we've had it a few times, is just the potential of captive breeding. Knowing it's an endangered species. Is that something that you're looking at, or is your conservation focus first mitigating current threats?
Odette, you go.
Yeah, for me, captive breeding is like a last resort, and I don't think we're there yet. Mitigation and obviously habitat first. So if there's no point captive breeding if you haven't got the habitat. But if we start killing more birds, then we can actually, then the predictions suggest are viable, then we will have a big problem. But I would still say that the effort should be put into mitigation and no-go areas for wind farms and power lines, and those kinds of things. We really have to work with the authorities to say no where it's inappropriate. So yeah, wouldn't be my port of call at this point, and I hope we never get there.
Just to add to that, Jess, I completely agree with what Odette has said. when Hank Chalmers was running Eagle Encounters here in the Western Cape, he once had a Black Harrier in, and he said it's one of the most difficult species. It was just so flighty and so nervous in captivity. And I only know one person, Kate Webster, who managed to raise two youngsters that were saved from a particular site. And I don't think captive breeding would actually work. It's too, according to Hank, who had years and years of experience captive handling and breeding and flying these birds, they just wouldn't thrive in captivity. So that it's a non-starter whether you believe it in it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you guys. And like Odette said, if you don't have the habitat, it's a futile endeavor. And the power of many is always an important factor. And we have many passionate individuals on this webinar and in your guys' team. And you've already done so much in the 20 years. And we fully believe in your efforts that you'll help save the species. So yeah, I think before we carry on for hours, I think we'll wrap up here. But thank you so much, Odette and Rob, for coming on board. Rob, again, you're going to soon become a regular, maybe just a co-host at this point. But this won't be the last time that we have either of you on the webinar. I'm sure everybody will jump on as soon as they see that you're part of the program. And we really look forward to the development of the conservation species plan and how we as citizens can get involved to help your efforts as well. Just tell the story of the Black Harrier. So we look forward to watching this the project evolve, and just good luck with everything. We're cheering for you on the sidelines.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks for this opportunity to talk to your wonderful audience. We're very appreciative. And just one last thing I would like to say to one of the unsung heroes here is Sam Ralston, who's been absolute, stalwart and star, and always the person that we turn to when we have a problem with wind farms or a sticky situation. She's always there. I know she's a bit sick at the moment, and I don't think she's tuned in directly, but huge shout out to her for all of the work that she does for us as well.
Absolutely. I second that 100%. Yeah.
Thanks for the shout out, Rob. We are very appreciative of Sam's work. All right. On that note, thanks everybody. Have a good evening. See you guys soon.
Good night.
Thanks,
Jess. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.